We acknowledge that in our current status quo that we have today, where lately this kind of mergers and acquisitions within the tech industry has been happening. As example, we have Goto by Gojek and Tokopedia. But we also acknowledge that there are some kind of problems happening in the status quo that we have today, which related a lot to the personal data of the consumers. We, as the other side of the house, wants to solve those kind of problems, and at the end of the day, we could also reach the goal which is we are not going to harm the consumer and laborers as the same as the government side of the house goal. But we don't think that kind of goal is actually going to be reached exclusively under the government proposal, which they regret this kind of mergers and acquisitions that are happening between the tech industries. We, as the opposite side of the house, believe that our current status quo, our current progress that we have today is actually doing enough. It is actually okay, because there are some kind of big companies that merge or kind of acquiring each other. And actually this kind of, even though it creates some kind of problems, we could do some kind of improvement to this kind of merge or acquiring scenarios, that probably we could improve on the personal data terms and services, and etc. And what we actually want to do as the opposite of the house is basically to stick with the status quo, because we think it is basically enough, and at the end of the day it is going to be justifiable for everyone. So before coming to my argument, I would like to give a point of rebuttal to the previous speaker. The Prime Minister of the government side of the house stated that mergers and acquisitions creates a power imbalance between small companies that hamper the decision making between these kind of small companies and their parent companies. But we believe that under this kind of mergers and acquisition scenario, the decision making are not going to be hampered, but instead it is going to be more well accelerated, and also it is going to be more well executed. Why is it so, Mr. and Mrs. Speakers? We believe that this kind of parent company has more ability on analyzing the market, on actually do what they have to do next. So we think it is going to be beneficial for this kind of small companies to not just decision making under their own companies, but also under this kind of analysis of the parent company's ability on analyzing the market. So we, as the opposite of the house, believe that the decision making of this small company under this kind of scenario is not going to be hampered, but instead it is going to be more well accelerated. So coming to my arguments, that I have two points of justification to explain today. So the first one, why we think the current progress is actually enough, and the second one is how mergers and acquisitions are not as unjustified as the government side case described. So coming to my first argument about why the current progress is actually enough. We, as the opposite of the house, believe that the current progress happening in status quo is actually enough, and we don't regret this kind of thing. Yet we also don't support that. We are not going to actually regret what have been happening to this kind of tech industries, that they've been like kind of merged or acquired each other. But we are also don't want to encourage this kind of entities to merge and acquire each other. The current progress that's what we mean by the current progress is actually enough. That there are some kind of merging and acquisition between this tech industry, but there are also not kind of those kind of scenario happening in our status quo. We need to understand that this kind of scenario, this kind of current progress really links to the industry's decisions to actually undergo this kind of scenario. We need to understand that the companies are also trying to make the service more reachable for the consumers, even though we believe that companies are actually mainly seeking on profit, but it doesn't change the fact that they want to fulfill the demand of the consumers in the very first place. So by doing this kind of mergers, we could actually give our service being more reachable. As example that we have in Instagram and Facebook, that they have been integrated with each other, so that you could actually follow your friends who to follow by from Facebook actually right away on Instagram. We think it is more efficient and more reachable service, and that kind of thing we need to understand why they undergo this kind of scenario. So coming to the second layer of the reasons why mergers and acquisitions is actually enough, and the current progress that we have is actually enough, that this kind of mergers and acquisitions is form of making a more reachable and efficient service, which is, we think that by doing this kind of thing, they could actually reach actually reach some kind of thing that that they can do before. As example, that you probably have to go for JNA or any other expedition brand as example, but when we buy from Tokopedia, but when this kind of merger and acquisition happen, we could actually buy from Tokopedia and and ship the thing that we bought by Gojek, and it is going to be more reachable and efficient, as they don't have to go for any other brands or any other thing. So we as the opposition side of the house believe that this kind of progress, our current progress, is actually enough. So coming to my second argument, that mergers and acquisitions are as unjustified as how the government side of the house case described. So why we think so? It is, Mr. and Mrs. Speakers. So first, it is actually increasing the chance of for small companies to actually strive toward this kind of very segmented market where there are only this kind of big companies. But with this kind of mergers and acquisitions, this small company could actually survive under this kind of very hard and rough market that we have in our status quo, that it is dominated by this kind of big companies. But with this kind of merge and acquisitions, this small company could actually be acquired or probably merged with the other big companies, so that at the end of the day, they are able to gain more sources on doing their businesses, and they could survive. And also, we're going to talk about the good for the second one is, we are going to talk about the good for the consumers, that they actually going to have more reachable and more efficient service as what they've never had before. We think that by this kind of merging and acquisitions between tech industries, that I said in my first argument before, that they are going to create some kind of service that never existed before, that at the end of the day, it is going to be good for the consumers, that they could actually have more efficient and more reachable service. So we as the opposite of the house believe that at the end of the day, it is going to actually not unjustified as how the government side described, and based on those reasons, we are proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.